Hey, what's going on, guys? Fatamerican here, coming at you with all the facts and none of the fluff. Let's talk about what race to pick as a warrior and why it's an orc. Every race on both factions can be a warrior. For the Alliance, that means human, night elf, gnome, and dwarf. For the Horde, that is orc, troll, tauren, and undead. We'll start off by talking about the Alliance and the humans. The first trait we're going to be talking about for humans is diplomacy. Reputation gains increased by 10%. This is nothing to scoff at, as there are some very long and hard reputation grinds, such as the Cenarian Circle rep or getting a Night Saber from the Night Elf rep. Human spirit, with a total increase in spirit by 5%, while good for leveling, has no real in-game impact, so we won't consider this when deciding if we're going to play a human as a warrior. Sword and Mace specialization increases Sword and Mace skill by 5, not just for one hand, but also two hands. At max level, this increases our hit percentage by 3% and reduces the penalty to glancing blows. This creates the best tanks and DPS for PvE content on the Alliance side. Perception, the human racial active, increases stealth detection in the area for rogues and druids. While this is a useful trait in niche situations, it doesn't create an overall PvP advantage large enough to consider humans the best race for PvP on the Alliance. The next race we'll be talking about for warriors is the Night Elf. Fair warning, I won't say too many great things about Night Elf warriors. Shadow Meld, the first Night Elf racial, allows you to stealth in place and has limited use, such as camping a rare spawn or flag defense in PvP. Quickness increases the Night Elf's chance to dodge by 1%. While seemingly useful as a mitigation tool, a tank's first priority is threat, which humans outshine Night Elves on by a large margin. Wisp Spirit increases Ghost Run speed by 50%. While not seeming that useful, a leveling warrior dies quite a bit, and this can cut down on leveling time substantially when added up. Night Elves have nature resistance increased by 10, and while this is useful in some PvE and PvP scenarios, 10 nature resistance isn't enough to sway our opinion while choosing a race. The next race on the Alliance is the Gnome, which overall has the best PvP racials for the Alliance. Escape Artist, the Gnome's first racial ability, is an active to escape roots and slows on a 1-minute cooldown, and it takes 1 second to cast. This is a huge problem for warriors, getting rooted and slowed and kited. Having any kind of ability to escape a root or a slow can help substantially in PvP, and is the main reason that gnomes shine over any of the other races. Expansive Mind increases total intellect by 5%. Warriors put no stat priority into intellect, and while it does help them level weapon skill, this trait is useless. As discussed with the Night Elves, nature resistance, gnomes' arcane resistance is a rather niche ability, and we shouldn't consider it when picking our race. The last gnome racial, engineering specialization, increases engineering skill by 15. At the in-game level, this has zero impact, as having 315 skill versus 300 skill makes no difference. The next race we'll be discussing is the Dwarf. Their first racial, Stone Form, is an active that makes them immune to bleed, poison, and disease effects, and increases armor by 10% on a 3-minute cooldown. This active is very useful against different classes such as the Rogue in PvP combat, making them the second best PvP option on the Alliance side. Gun specialization, increasing gun skill by 5 for warriors, has little to no benefit in PvP or PvE combat. There is very limited use to increased frost resistance for the dwarves. The same statements apply as with the gnomes and night elves. Find treasure, while being a neat racial ability, has very little impact on overall gameplay and will rarely see use. And that was the last of the alliance races to talk about. We'll start on the Horde side with the best overall warrior race in vanilla, the Orc. Blood Fury, the first Orc racial active, increases base melee attack power by 25% for 15 seconds and reduces healing effects by 50% for 25 seconds. This alone would make Orc warriors very high on the contention list for the best warrior in the game, and increases the DPS of Orc DPS warriors substantially as it's on a 2-minute cooldown. The next Orc racial, Hardiness, increases the chance to resist stuns by 25%. This means 1/4 of the time that you would be stunned, you would not get stunned because of your racial decision. It goes without saying that this racial alone increases the PvP capacity of the Orcs by a substantial amount. Command increases pet damage by 5% for Hunter and Warlock Orcs and has 0 effect on Orc warriors. The last benefit for Orcs is Axe Specialization, which increases Axe skill by 5. As with the humans earlier, this applies to 1- and 2-hand axes and increases hit by 3% and reduces the effect of glancing blows substantially. This makes them both the best tank and DPS on the Horde. Trolls are the second race we're going to be talking about on the Horde. Their first active racial ability, Berserking, increases your casting and attack speed by 10 to 25% based on missing health. It has a 3-minute cooldown and lasts 10 seconds. This ability makes them the second best DPS on the Horde, and while not using axes, makes them the #1 tanking race while not wearing an axe, such as when wielding Thunder Fury. Regeneration, the next troll ability, increases health regeneration by 10% and allows 10% of health regeneration to continue while in combat. This is useful while raiding and leveling and makes trolls, again, very good tanks on the Horde side. Beast Slaying increases damage dealt versus beast by 5%. While useful for leveling and grinding, it doesn't provide a huge benefit in the end game for warriors. Throwing and bow specialization increases the skills with those weapons by 5. The same thing applies as with the dwarf gun skill. It provides no real benefit in PvE or PvP combat. The third race to talk about on the Horde is the Tauren. They have an ability called War Stomp that is an active racial that stuns nearby enemies for 2 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. This ability can be used very commonly in PvP and PvE scenarios if you know how to use it properly. The next trait, Endurance, increases the total health of the Tauren by 5%. While Endurance may appear attractive on the surface, in most cases in PvE or PvP, if you were to drop below 5% health, you're probably already dead. Cultivation, the third Tauren racial, increases herbalism skill by 15. Other than picking 15 or so Peace Bloom and Silverleaf, this has no benefit at all and may be the worst trait in the game. Nature Resistance, the last Tauren racial, is the same racial as the Night Elves, and as stated earlier, should not be weighed in our decision in deciding race. The final race we'll be talking about is the Undead. Their first perk, Will of the Forsaken, is their racial active and provides immunity to charm, fear, and sleep effects. It lasts for 5 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. As most of us already know, many warrior abilities break fear, charm, and sleep, so Will of the Forsaken is quite redundant. Cannibalize regenerates 7% of total health every 2 seconds for 10 seconds, while near a dead corpse of a humanoid or undead. This has limited use in PvP and PvE content other than to BM someone staying in their body, which can be rather entertaining. Lastly, we'll be talking about shadow resistance, and as all of the resistances go, has no real weight on our decision whether to pick a race or not. Underwater breathing increases your breath underwater by 300%. Some water quests are rather annoying, and this does help out with those in certain situations, but overall, this trait does not help in PvE or PvP combat. That sums up all the potential races for warriors, with the top overall pick being the orc, and over on the alliance side, humans and gnomes both having their own domains of dominance. I think it's important to note that at the highest end of tanking on the horde, with the best weapons in the game, aka Thunder Fury, trolls take the edge over orcs for tanking. Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. If you want more content, please let me know. I promise I will keep them as short and informative as possible. Check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/Fatamerican. Would love to have you over there and chat. And if you do like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe down below.